Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tim Huxley, Executive Director of the Asia Office of the International Institute for Strategic Studies here in Singapore. IISS Asia is one of the international offices of the IISS, which has its headquarters in London. I'm extremely pleased to welcome you to this latest event in the IISS Fullerton lecture series. The spirit and purpose of the lecture series is to inspire informed and intelligent public debate on matters of international importance from an international perspective. And I'm delighted to see such a large audience here this afternoon. For those of you who are watching the video of this Fullerton lecture remotely, I should say that we're holding this event in the ballroom of the imposing and very historic Fullerton Hotel in the heart of Singapore's financial district. We're honored this Tuesday afternoon to have with us as our latest Fullerton lecture His Excellency Petro Poroshenko, the President of Ukraine. For slightly more than a year, Ukraine has been at the very forefront of global news and, I must say, also international security concerns, with first the Euromaidan protests, which began in November last year, leading to the significant change of government in Kiev in February this year, Russia's occupation of Crimea shortly afterwards, and then the outbreak of a Russian-supported separatist insurgency in eastern Ukraine. Fighting there continues despite the Minsk Protocol signed on the 5th of September with the aim of de-escalating the conflict, as well as its severe costs for people in Ukraine, with more than 4,000 people killed. The conflict there has provoked the most serious crisis in relations between Russia and the West since the end of the Cold War. This afternoon, we will hear from the person best qualified to provide the Ukrainian perspective on the crisis embroiling his country. Petro Alexeyevich Poroshenko was elected president in May this year with more than 54% of the vote. He was born in Volgograd in the Odessa Oblast in 1965. He graduated in 1989 with a degree in economics from Kiev State University and subsequently worked in the Department of International Economic Relations at the university. But Mr. Poroshenko quickly became active as an entrepreneur and businessman. Not long after the breakup of the Soviet Union and Ukraine's independence, in 1993, he established an industrial and investment company specializing in the automotive industry, confectionery, and later other processing industries. His subsequent success in confectionery led to his nickname, the Chocolate King, but his businesses also came to include car and bus factories, a shipyard, and a TV channel. Mr. Poroshenko entered parliament in 1998 and has been deeply involved in his country's politics since then. I'm sure that he will excuse me for not detailing all the twists and turns of Ukraine's political scene during the intervening years, but suffice it to say, in various governments he has held important posts, including that of Foreign Minister and also Minister of Trade and Economic Development. In terms of international relations, he has favored closer ties with the European Union and has also supported Ukraine's eventual membership of NATO. As an independent member of parliament, he actively supported the Euromaidan protest and attempted to find a compromise solution in the Crimea prior to its annexation by Russia. Since Mr. Poroshenko's election as president in the decisive vote in May this year, his necessarily overriding preoccupation has been the challenge of how to maintain Ukraine's national unity. In his Fullerton lecture today, the President will speak about his country's crisis and its implications for Europe and for the wider world. Following his address, the President has kindly agreed to respond to questions from this very large audience here in the Fullerton Hotel this afternoon. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'm strongly believing that in this audience are all the friends of Ukraine. First of all, thank all of you for the interest to Ukraine. Today, World is like the computer processor. It gets smaller and faster every single year. And sometimes it overheats. This is what seems to be happening in the world these days. A year ago, an attempt to take away Ukraine's dream not only caused turmoil in my country, but affected things economically and politically worldwide. Yes, it all started with a dream. Ukraine's dream to become a European, free, democratic, honest, and successful state. For 2 decades, ever since Soviet Union fell apart, the people of Ukraine lived with the certainty that the freedom can change things to the better. We saw our neighbor, the new EU member, succeed before our eyes while joining with the EU. We saw their dreams come true. We were certain our dreams would too. We saw the united Europe work wonders and change historic destinies. The EU enlargement became an amazing success story unfolding right before our eyes. No other success story seemed more convicting to Ukrainian eye. We had a new generation of Ukrainians grown up to the tune of the European idea. These young people knew 3 things. First, Ukraine chose Europe. Second, path would be difficult. And the third, sooner or later, success would come. When in November 2013, the corrupt rulers of the country decided to take this dream away, Ukraine exploded. Thousands of people took the streets in the protest to the government decision. It was peaceful, very peaceful protest at once. It was exactly 1 year ago. Yet the government remained deaf to the voice of the people, week after week, month after month. The anger was bottling up. The government thought that the cold winter would cool it down and make people go away. It did not. The government decided to disperse protesters using the violence, but even more people came. The government started shooting the people, and the people did not back down. They never gave up. In the end, after the long 3 months of fight, after over 100 dead, after splitting the country apart, the corrupt rulers fled. In the end, people have won. However, just when one tragedy was over, another started. The neighboring country invaded Ukraine and took away part of our land. It was a shock, since this other country was one that pledged to take care for Ukraine's sovereignty in exchange for the Ukraine nuclear weapons in 1994. Exactly 20 years ago, in December 1994, under the Budapest Memorandum, Ukraine gave third nuclear arsenal in the world in exchange of the guarantee of security from Russia, United States, United Kingdom, France, and China. The annexation of Crimea was not only the violation of all international laws, it was an act of betrayal of the historic proportion. When we gave up our nuclear potential in exchange of the world, and in particular Russia's security assurance. 20 years afterwards, Russia broke the pact and attacked us. The world was not ready to act upon it accordingly. Ukraine was caught off guard. Yes, Ukraine was not ready for that. And the world was not ready for that. But believe me, we are ready now to defend our country. Not only inside Ukraine. The Ukrainians throughout the world demonstrate their decisiveness to defend our native land. Ukraine is standing its ground, yes, and Ukraine now is bleeding. We are at a state of war. But what we have on our mind is peace and reforms. Peace depends on many factors. First and foremost, the cooperation of the side who started this war and fomenting it now. Ladies and gentlemen, the success of reform depends only on Ukraine, and today is the moment to act upon it. We have a unique situation. All parliamentary parties now support Ukraine European Union integration. I just want to attract your attention. In the May 2014, 54% of Ukrainians vote for me as a pro-European president. Now, in the October 26, almost 80% of the Ukrainians support pro-European parties. The level of the pro-European support was never so high. And this is the level of responsibility Ukrainians demonstrate, first time in their history. I want to attract your attention that was happened during the war. Maybe one of the most difficult time for Ukraine, the war for our independence. Both the parliament, the cabinet, and the president are determined to implement necessary changes. We understand that it can be painful. Ukraine's old problem, the rift between the desire of the people and aspiration of the political class, seems finally overcome. Never in Ukraine history was the parliament filled with so many ambitious, young, modern, future and European-oriented people. During this parliamentary election, 54% of the members of parliament is new. And that is very impressive. Never was the political class under so much pressure to conduct the reform. All prerequisites are there. Yes, we have a plan. We have a necessary people. We have a public consensus. And we enjoy the world support. And we have no other option like success. Lives of millions and the destiny of Europe's second largest country will depend on that. There is a temptation to see this peace and reform separately. That is, postpone the reform till the situation settled down and the nation does not need to spend every dime on the financing the army. There is some logic to it. Yes, but it is misconception. These two tracks go in parallel and will need to be worked upon simultaneously. What has been done so far? And most importantly, what will be done? It is the most difficult of time we conducted 2 democratic elections in a row. We have a cabinet that's deeply preoccupied with creating the better environment for the business. We have, first time in our history, believe me, I was in 2 governments where I was the only person who speaks English. Now every single person in our government speaks fluent English. Most of them have a Western education. All of them are prepared for the reform. We never ever have such a situation in our country. And there will be more good people coming to the cabinet. We have a Western business representative commending Ukraine for ending the reign of bribery created by the previous governments. But of course, more, much more is to come. And newly created National Anti-Corruption Bureau will provide for speedy and effective investigation of yesterday's and today's public servant. On the 14th of January, when the law for Anti-Corruption Bureau come in force, we will have the candidate, very effective candidate, who can demonstrate absolutely different anti-corruption policy in Ukraine. Today, I spent more than an hour in Anti-Corruption Bureau in Singapore. Singapore would be anti-corruption policy would be a benchmark for us. We agreed already to have an effective form of cooperation. In every single ministry, we will have an anti-corruption advisor from the European Union or from the United States. What for? Just to have a trust that we have a political will to fight against corruption. Political will from the top, from the president, from the government, from the prime minister, from the judges, from the independent rule of law, to demonstrate the most effective way we can for anti-corruption. I told that we have two main dangers: the war against the aggressor and the war against the corruption. And in both war, we should be the winner. We can win because we have the best people and we have the best condition to demonstrate, and we have no other option like to win. That would be a new tax regulation. Will close loopholes and streamline for taxation while paying more attention to the personal income and expenditures of public servants and their family members, exactly like they do in Singapore. This will help to break back Ukraine's key enemy, corruption. The presidential program, Ukraine 2020, Strategy of Development, comprised 62 reform programs. Why 2020? This is 6 years when Ukraine should be adequate to the criteria to apply for the membership in the European Union. And we know exactly with all 62 reform, the KPI, when and where and what should be done. Following of them, I see as a key for the new Ukraine. First, I told, anti-corruption. Second, judiciary. Third, law enforcement. Fourth, national security and defense. Fifth, decentralization of power with the involvement of the municipality in the process of governing the country. Next, deregulation, creating the new investment climate and attracting the investment. Next, taxation. Next, healthcare, program of energy efficiency, and, which is very important, program for the Ukraine promotion. Those who never been in Ukraine, you cannot even imagine how beautiful is this country. And I, as a president of Ukraine, I invite you to visit Ukraine because 99% those who return back from Ukraine become a patriot of Ukraine no matter what nationality I has. And I think that program for the promotion. Thank you for this applause. I think most of you will visit Ukraine. And we need your attention and we need your support because at this day, I think this is a key element for Ukrainian success. I declare this goal as Ukraine's ambition and something by which government as a whole and the president in particular is willing and ready to be judged in the next coming years or even months. Once the unoccupied Ukraine reaches sustainable peace and with a ceasefire enforced, we can get close to this. Once it's consolidated as one nation, and nations tend to pull together under outside pressure. Once Ukraine enjoys full access to the European Union market and accommodates its product to the European Union standard, this is the difficult but doable task ahead of us. It will have the clean historic slate it deserves. I realize this is a lot once. I see full extent of economic and financial challenges of Ukraine is faced with as a result of war and mismanagement of the last year. And still, I think we are closer to success than at any point of the history for two reasons. First time in our history, Ukrainian is ready for the reform as a nation, as a people. It never happened before. Believe me, I go now throughout all Ukraine. Ukraine was never such a united like now. We don't have now any differences by the language, by the church, by the East and West, by the pro-Moscow or pro-European. Ukraine now is, all Ukrainian is pro-European, very patriotic, and I never ever seen such a many blue and yellow Ukrainian flag as today. I'm proud of my country, believe me. In such a difficult time, Ukrainian nation are united to fight against aggressor, to fight against corruption, and to win the program for the reform. The majority of Ukrainians are deeply aware, and now, and our slogan, now or never. And they will do everything to see Ukrainian turn the corner from their pro-corrupt, post-Soviet state to the future-oriented young democracy. Second, we have the backing of our partner throughout the world, in Europe, in America, in Japan, in New Zealand, in Australia, and in Singapore. And in any country you can visit now, you have a meeting with the Ukrainian who is extremely active now, supporting our soldiers in the anti-terroristic operation in the real war, and supporting Ukraine, and supporting Ukrainian president, which is decisively for reform. Every person, every nation of the world that takes freedom seriously, it is on Ukraine's side now, and it means a lot of us, for us. This is the momentum on which we plan to build: reform, peace, unification. This all derives from the ultimate sacrifice made by Ukrainians during the revolution in Kiev. And a government that was born by this kind of revolution can be only the government of reform: transparent, result-oriented, accountable. Such a government was my promise to Ukraine, and my team plans to fulfill it. Ladies and gentlemen, today's Europe is a continent out of balance, and it is a place thrown back in time. The peaceful Europe of untouchable border is not there anymore. The pre-Crimea crisis international relations are gone. What kind of international disposition will emerge from this crisis is still unclear. A lot will depend on the outcome of today's crisis. Ukraine's drive for freedom has a serious problem. But this fight was not and is not about Ukraine. It is about two models of modernity that complete for the minds of nations. One of them believes that freedom is absolutely necessity. The other thinks that freedom is a luxury. One thinks the man's nature is to be free. The other thinks a man's nature is to be ruled by state and provided by it. One ideology is based on things like freedom, democracy, and tolerance. The other one, in fact, denies them. The Ukrainian crisis is a junction between these two ways of thinking. By choosing sides in this conflict, we choose between them. But there is also a third option: to live in delusion. Sometimes we choose between the comfortable lie and uncomfortable truth. The comfortable lie is the notion that this conflict are purely domestic issue. This is a civil war in Ukraine. It would be domestic issue if Crimea was not occupied in February and March by Russia. It would be domestic issue if 10,000 Russian troops was not appeared in Donetsk and Lugansk. And I promise you, if we close the border and withdraw the foreign troops from my country within 1 week, we will have a peace and stability in Ukraine. This is absolutely clear message. The people of Donetsk and Lugansk, having a humanitarian catastrophe, need our effective action, our unity, need solidarity with Ukraine. And I am really proud that today we have it throughout the world. And I thank to the Singaporean authorities who from the very first day of the conflict, who from the March 2014 make a very strong statement supporting Ukraine and demonstrating solidarity with Ukraine. This signal, Ukraine is really welcome, and thank the Singapore authorities for that. It would be the Ukrainian crisis is about European values and therefore about the Europe. Willing or not, Europe stands at the core of this conflict. Distancing ourselves would mean betraying everything Europe stands for. Let me be clear on one thing. Ukraine needs peace, not war. Ukrainian president is for peace, not for war. From the very first day of my presidency, I proposed the peace plan, which is absolutely clear. Immediate ceasefire, releasing all the hostages, close the border and withdrawing all the foreign troops from my territory, and launching the political process, local election under the Ukrainian legislation, free and fair, with the monitoring of the international observers. And we are ready to dialogue with those people of Donetsk and Lugansk we vote for. And that would be a catastrophe for our aggressor. Because this is the absolutely wild, accepted norm. There is not existing any other way out, like a peace and political dialogue. And today, 1.5 hours ago, we declare the new ceasefire. 1.5 hours. We don't have, until now, no one shelter. We don't have any more killed soldiers. And I cross my fingers. And I pray that this ceasefire, if they kept and open the door for the dialogue. I think that if we will be well coordinated, if we arrange the pressure on Russia, if we continue the sanction, that will bring peace to Ukraine. The only thing we now want to demonstrate that Ukraine is a peaceful nation and wants for peace. Ukraine wants to stop the bleeding, but not at the price of giving up our freedom, our democracy, our sovereignty, our territorial integrity, our independence. One cannot honestly say that we were not motivated enough in reaching this goal. Sadly, the aggressor was motivated too. Hence, the measured and only relative success of the peace process. A hybrid war became a hybrid ceasefire, which is not a big difference from those shedding their blood in Ukraine's east. A significant part of Ukraine remains under occupation. Thousands of foreign citizens under the foreign flags use the foreign weapons to kill Ukrainians and to grab Ukrainian lands. Aggression, incursion, invasion, war. You can choose the word by yourselves. One thing is clear. Ukraine is defending itself. It's standing its ground, and it's standing Europe ground too. Ukraine is a peace-oriented nation and is a place where the moral strengths of the democratic world will enter and re-emerge triumphantly or perish. Giving up on Ukraine or forcing Ukraine to give up itself would be decision with long echo. Therefore, I am deeply, from the bottom of my heart, thankful to all the nation and to all the people of goodwill who feel our pain and who stand by Ukrainian side. And I am standing moved to see so many of them here, on the other side of our little planet. And I thank all of you for this solidarity. This is very important for us. In conclusion, let me state the obvious. We live in an interconnected world. As the saying goes, the wings of the butterfly in one side of the planet can cause the storm on the other. For Ukraine, the storm is already there. We never wanted and never thought it is possible to be the epicenter, the place where the global scale can tilt one way or another. But we are that place right now. We carry this burden. We will carry it with dignity. And we will do what it takes to make sure that the global scale tilts in the right direction. I hope you will too. It all started with just a dream. But as Ukrainian revolution show, nothing in the world is more resilient than that. In the end, we will succeed, and it will be success for all of us. Thank you very much indeed. And Slava Ukraini!
Thank you very much. Can take the question sitting down if you want.
I think I can start from here.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your really excellent address. I won't try to summarize everything that you said over the last 20 or 30 minutes, but some of the most important points that I think you made were about Ukraine's commitment to integration with the European Union, despite the continuing security crisis in the east of the country. You also emphasized the degree of national unity that's apparent in the face of the challenges that you face in Ukraine at the moment. And you talked about the Ukrainian crisis as potentially as a turning point in Europe's international disposition, as you put it. And very importantly, you mentioned the new ceasefire that was announced earlier today, and the potential that hopefully holds. So we've been fortunate to hear about Ukraine's crisis and its wider ramifications from you, the president of the country today. I'm sure that there will be many in our audience who would like to ask you questions. Could I ask that anyone who would indeed like to ask a question of the president, please raise his or her hand. Once I've recognized you, the microphone will come to you. You'll then have the chance to ask your question. Could I also ask that you keep your question as brief as possible and very much to the point? Thank you very much. In the middle there, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President, for a very engaging speech. I'm Alexander Korolev, Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore. And it's very clear from your speech that Ukraine sees its future in Europe, that Ukraine considers itself a European country. But I think a key question for Ukraine is whether Europe sees Ukraine a European country. So, and whether it wants Ukraine to become a full-fledged member of European Union, because association agreement Ukraine was offered, it doesn't mean EU membership. So my question is, what is your personal understanding of intentions of European countries? Do you really believe that Europe, meaning EU, considers Ukraine a full-fledged member of EU in future? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that question. I'm absolutely sure that Europe are ready for Ukraine. Ukraine maybe passed the most difficult exam in their history, and maybe they pay the most high price for getting European membership. I can agree with you that one or two leaders of the European Union countries now demonstrate some doubts about this possibility. But do you know why I'm proud? That immediately when anybody mentions some doubts, the people on the street immediately demonstrate the support of Ukraine. And we don't need now to ask, please open the door. Because association agreement itself, mentioning that there is a 49 article of the agreement of the European Union, demonstrate that any European nation can make a request for the membership. But we should be ready for that. We should fight the corruption. We should follow the Maastricht, Copenhagen, and other different criteria. We should reform our country and demonstrate that we are reformers. We are European, not only by words, but the results. And that's we urgently need now. And I am absolutely sure Europe cannot be the full Europe without Ukraine. Ukraine is the biggest European country. Europe was never been so strong enough without Ukraine. And another very important thing I want to stress, the war we have here in Ukraine is not the war for Ukraine. This is the war for freedom. This is the war for democracy. This is the war for Europe, if you want. Because the Ukrainian crisis demonstrates that all post-war security system is not working. The decision of the United Nations Security Council is not effective because one of the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council is the aggressor. And that means that the security system is not working. And that means that no country in the world can feel themselves secure after what happened in Ukraine. And we have just two options. Either all of us will win, and that would be the victory of all of us, or Ukraine will lost. But that would be not the loss of Ukraine. That would be the loss of the whole world. That's why it is extremely important that Ukraine get a membership perspective and be the member of European Union. I'm absolutely sure this is the key goal of my presidency.
Sir.
Hello, Oleg Aizin. I'm Ukrainian living and working in Singapore. You talked a lot about Ukraine's economic integration into Europe, but as successful businessman, you know well that Europe is not everything in the world. Do you see much potential in Ukraine's economic cooperation with Asia in general and Southeast Asia and Singapore in particular?
Of course, Europe is not everything in the world. This is what does we mean mentioning Europe? Europe is not the territory. European Union is not the border. European Union is the values. European Union is the investment climate. European Union is the competitiveness. With the same value, with the same competitiveness, with the same investment climate, with the same rule of law, with the same anti-corruption standard, we can go either to Germany or to Singapore. Without that, we cannot go neither to Germany nor to Singapore. This is very simple. That's why we need to reform the country. That's why we need to build up the investment climate. That's why we need to build a predictability for the investor. Because we have, unfortunately, not very successful story for German businessmen and for Singaporean one. And we should demonstrate the difference. And today on our meeting with the President, with the Prime Minister of Singapore, we're talking about the free trade agreement with Singapore, because this is the only way how to overcome the crisis. We're talking about the investment opportunities. We're talking about maybe in future when we will have the biometric passport, we will speak about the facilitation of the visa regime, promoting investment, securing investment. And I think that the Singapore can be a gate for Ukraine to the Asian market. One of the very secure and very comfortable gate, what I see here. And I think that if we continue this work, I think that the privilege of the entering to the Asian market through the Singapore would be one of the very important arguments for Ukrainian to invest here in Asia.
Dr. Pierre Noël, Senior Fellow for Energy Security with the IISS in Singapore, at the front here.
Thank you very much for your speech, Mr. President. It's not a question about energy. 10 years ago, I think almost to the week, there were very important events going on in Ukraine and in Kiev, which stayed in history as the Orange Revolution. And I was working in Europe at the time. I went very often to Brussels and other capitals. I went to Kiev as well. And the type of discourse that you had in the first part of your speech tonight about the commitment to reform political, economic, legal, the judiciary, all of those promises and commitments were made by the leaders who emerged from the Orange Revolution 10 years ago. And as we all know, those commitments were not fulfilled. Those promises were not upheld. So my question is very simple. You already have guessed it, is as external observers, but committed observers, friends of Ukraine, as you described us at the beginning, how can we be more confident that those promises and commitments will be upheld this time?
What was before? What was during the Orange Revolution? The conflict inside the team. We now demonstrating completely different approach. We provide the presidential election, and all of the Democratic candidates demonstrate the unity. We provide the parliamentary election, and immediately after the parliamentary election, even before the time when the law gave us the opportunity, we create a pro-European coalition. More than 300 votes, more than constitutional majority, to demonstrate our decisive approach for reform. We demonstrate completely different approach to the forming the government. Today, we use the quite a new practice when we invite the 3 citizens of other countries in our government. I give them as a president the Ukrainian citizenship, and the top investment banker from the United States, very experienced economist from Lithuania, and former minister of the health and rector of the Tbilisi State University become a minister in Ukraine. This is completely different approach demonstrated the technocratic government, which is already exists. And I think that the strategy which we demonstrate now give us also the opportunity. And the last arguments. During the war, during the very, very difficult test we're now passing, we simply do not have a rights for one single mistake. All of us understand responsibility. I'm absolutely sure Ukraine will win. And if Ukraine will win, the world will win. No doubt in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Right here, in the middle.
Hello, my name is Alex Kano, and I'm Singaporean citizen of Russian origin. Regarding the mention of the new ceasefire, does it mean that government of Ukraine decided to abandon the attempt to resolve the conflict on the east of Ukraine by military means, and it will be resolved through the negotiations?
Does it mean,
does it mean that the conflict in the east of Ukraine will be resolved through negotiations, not through the military means, not through the ATO?
Yeah. I told in my speech, I don't see any possibility to solve the conflict only by military means. Aggressor is the biggest military machine in the continent. Its army is 1,200,000 troops with the state-of-art most modern weapons. The only privilege, the only our strength that we defend in our own territory, our own land, and we don't give them any chance. But the solving of the conflict is lay in the political sphere. And that's why I'm asking. My peace plan is withdraw the troops, open political dialogue, and the election. We proposed that before. We make the special local election and decentralization status for these some districts of Donetsk and Lugansk region. Unfortunately, irresponsibility of the terrorist leaders provide the fake election without any international presence, non-transparent. This is not an election. And they try to elect so-called leaders of the independent states, which would be not recognized by anybody, including Russia. This is the form how the political dialogue cannot be fulfilled. But if we will have today the ceasefire, we have a Minsk Memorandum and Minsk Protocol, which was signed by all the bodies, including OSCE and including Russia. And we have that within 30 days, we should enter to the touchline, providing the necessity for the election, open the media, because now it's only, they use only propaganda from the Russian TV. They do not have an access to Ukrainian TV and to the world mass media. But we understand that there is not existing the military solution of the conflict. That should be a political solution. We understand that.
Thank you very much. Madam, just here. Yeah.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
My name is Natalia Olenets. I'm a Ukrainian American living and working in Singapore. The war versus Ukraine is also being fought on the battlefield of public opinion and information, media, and social media. How will Ukraine fight Russia's powerful propaganda machine that's working overtime to spread disinformation and confuse?
Thank you very much for this question. That's true. Our opponents spending dozens of millions of dollars every single week for the propaganda of war. But I think that the complete isolation of Russia and full support of the whole world for Ukraine demonstrate that this spending of money is ineffective. But we create a necessary step to be more effective in the world. In the very next weeks, it's appeared English language global satellite channel when we can deliver the truth about Ukraine. We speak with the European leaders about the pan-European Russian language channel, which Russian-speaking audience in Europe particularly delivered a different point of view from Russia today. And I think that this is the same priority like the victory on the war. You're absolutely right.
We'll have a question from this side for a change. Gentleman with the beard, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Mitra. I'm originally from Donetsk. And I have a question. You previously told that Ukraine was not prepared and the world was not prepared. So what is your vision of actually getting prepared to these kind of challenges? And is there actually any roadmap for reforming Ukrainian internal security doctrine and external security doctrine? And in particular, do you think that reforming the firearms legislation, maybe by Switzerland example, would actually have a positive effect on the capability to tackle these challenges? Thanks.
Thank you very much. And thank you for being from Donetsk. You are so pro-Ukrainian. This is another evidence how Ukraine is united. And look, of course, Swiss model is one of the possible models for reforming the security and defense sector. I can tell you that half a year ago, we don't have an army. Army was completely destroyed, without the weapons, without combat spirit, without combat experience, without possibility to defend our country. During the last half a year, we built up our army. We do more than previous government for the 23 years, and we do our best to stop the aggressor. We have more modern weapons, communication, radar, non-lethal. We have lots of things already done. And I give you results of 2 opinion polls. In year 2008, it was an opinion poll, how many % of Ukrainians are ready with the weapons in their hands to defend their country? Can you imagine that the figure was 13, 1-3. Today the figures is 62. This is they demonstrate how a new country was born. And the technology, reforming of the security and defense sphere is one of our top priority. With a very effective cooperation with our partners from the United States, from the European Union. Experience of Singapore and Lee Kuan Yew, how they build up the new strategy for the defense of their own country is also very interesting for us. Because that was built in the condition when how I say, when it was extremely difficult. I am absolutely sure that Ukraine now has one of the most strongest army in the world. We do not expect that anybody from NATO, from our partners, will come to Ukrainian territory and defend our country instead of us. But we are absolutely sure that the cooperation in the military and technical sphere will help us a lot to defend our country. Again, because we defending not only our independence, we defend the standard of, we defend the values, we defend the freedom, we defend the democracy. We, all Ukrainian. And I think this is the most important our priority. I think that within next 2 months we can present it, the strategy for the security and defense. And this strategy will demonstrate how significantly will reform our security and defense sector and how we significantly rising up their effectiveness. But even now, what we have done for this half a year is really impressive, believe me, how it changed our armed forces and security sector.
We have time for one more question. At the back, just here. So, just gentleman in the white shirt. Yes.
Thanks very much for your time today. You spoke about...
Could you say who you are and where you're from?
I'm Patrick Boyd. I'm a Canadian, and I work and live in Singapore. You spoke about political and economic reform, and also about sort of persuasion and negotiation as an end to this conflict. I'm just curious, you also mentioned membership into the EU. If that was something that they could offer you, is Eastern Ukraine negotiable? I mean, would you be able to walk away from the east of Ukraine if you can get everything else that you've spoken about?
Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank the Canada for the solidarity with us. This is not a joke, really. I was really impressed how the ordinary Canadian during my visit to Ottawa supporting us. And look, this is thousands and thousands of kilometers from Ukraine. But all the people from Canada understand that there's their own pain. Second, during my presidential campaign, I was in Lugansk and I was in Donetsk. If you're asking me what is my biggest impression from Donetsk, this is the year 2012, when we have a European championship on football, on soccer. When hundreds of thousands of the people in Donetsk singing Ukrainian anthems, wearing Ukrainian flags, and being, again, one of the most pro-Ukrainian cities. I can assure you once again, if withdraw the foreign troops, the level of support in Donetsk and Lugansk of the Ukrainian and pro-Ukrainian movement would be enormous. I can give you another statistics. The number of people who moved from the occupied territory, from Donetsk and Lugansk, to the central and western Ukraine now is over 600,000 people. Number of people who goes to Russia is less than 40,000. This is the demonstration where people wants to go and where people wants to live. And this is another argument, another evidence that we cannot leave them alone with the aggressor, with the bandits, with the terrorists. All of us forget the case of the MH17, where 300 innocent victims were hit by terrorists, which was equipped by Russia, give the weapons by Russia, trained by Russia, and most probably they have their officers from Russia, and hit the passenger plane. This is the demonstration, the very good demonstration that this is the the terror is global. And that does not mean that the Donetsk and Lugansk is far away, thousands of kilometers from Malaysia or from Australia. Because Australia and Malaysia was one of the most nation who suffered the most from this terroristic attack. And understand how small is the global order and how united we should be together with the people of Donetsk and with the people of Lugansk. They are citizens of Ukraine, and I am president of whole Ukraine, and I am fighting for their freedom, for their democracy, and I am fighting for the making closer the date for peace, the date for the election. My proposal is give them a right to elect their own leader. What's wrong with that? And the position of my opponent is fighting against election, because they never ever win this election. This is the only way. Maybe anybody likes, maybe anybody don't like, but the election is the only way how we can settle the situation. And I think that if everything goes well, we can have in March the new local election under Ukrainian legislation with the observation of the OEC and international inspector. And that is the start for the new, key, very important dialogue with the people of Donetsk and Lugansk about their future. Their pro-Ukrainian future, their future in the sovereign, independent Ukraine. And we don't give up their fate to anybody, including Russia, including terrorists. I promise you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A great answer to that question. Thank you, Mr. President, for answering those questions so fully and frankly. That was quite a range of questions, and I'm sure that there would have been many more if we could have continued. And I think those answers were an excellent follow-up to your lecture, and I think we'll all leave this event today with a much better understanding of what's happening in Ukraine and what its implications for Europe and the wider world are. Thank you very much again. We're delighted that we were able to host you for this event, and I'm sorry that we have to bring it to a close now. Could I ask all our guests here to remain seated, please, until the President has left the room? Thank you very much.
And thank you, all of you.